Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on Twitch. We are coding some interface code right now. We're coding some UI, some user interface. Only this is actually not user interface for the game, it's user interface for the developer. We are trying to make a few little UI elements that we can use when we are running the game in sort of our development mode so that we can do things like, if we want to edit values or we want to toggle things on and off or be able to select what we are trying to view in our profiler was kind of one of the things that motivated us to do this particular thing that we're doing with the UI elements. And so we implemented a simple radial control yesterday and got most of the way through actually doing it. I mean, it's functional, it's just not particularly pretty. And so today what I'd like to do is kind of build that out a little bit more. Kind of like look at maybe doing, in addition to a radial sort of pick style thing, also maybe some listing and those sorts of things. So again, I'm kind of just going to go for a little bit. I'm just going to like make some more UI stuff as we go. And then, at some point, and I may do some of it today, I may not. Again, it's entirely flexible. It's just based on taste, sort of as I come through different parts of the program. What I feel like should be the next logical step based on what I'm looking at. We may start to sort of pull out the radial control stuff into something that's a little cleaner and more usable, because right now it's just kind of a hard-coded thing that we did to just see how to code it in general. I may start pulling that out, or I may leave that for a little bit later. I may hard-code a bunch of different UI element things and then see them kind of operating together and then start to pull them out into a more reasonably architected thing. So I don't know. We'll see when I am feeling comfortable as I look at it, when I'm feeling comfortable that enough is there to start doing that kind of piecing out. That is when I'll start. So we're here on day 192. If you want to follow along at home and you have pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org, you can unpack day 191 as source code. That's what I'm starting with. That is what I am starting with. So here's where we were at when we stopped yesterday. You can see that there's actually sort of this radial control thing here. And it's like I said, we did all the basic work to implement it, but it's still kind of ugly. Like the things can kind of overlap each other, and there's no way to not pick something right now, right? So we just, whichever one the cursor's closest to, that's the one it picked. So this would not be like a particularly great control. We also haven't lined these things up in any way that's particularly intelligent. So, like I said, there's plenty of stuff that we would want to do here, but it's already working. So if I want to, I can just do kind of a nice right swipe there, does the toggle profile graph, right? A diagonal up swipe, right? And you can see I don't even have to think about it to pick. It's just a nice muscle memory thing. So that's kind of just like, it's nice to have radial menus for that very reason, because they're very fast to use. And it's kind of just a nice little user interface element to have. Again, real simple. I mean, you saw me implement it in, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes. I'm not sure what total stream time we spent out of yesterday's stream doing it. But again, 40 minutes to implement a basic thing, and we could clean this up a little bit more in another 20, 30 minutes to make it look a little nicer and behave a little nicer. So, you're talking about an hour and a half of total dev time or something like that, even if you're starting from almost nothing. As long as you have a way to just output some text, you can make one of these, and again, they're pretty handy. So I'm going to go ahead and start thinking about this through a little bit more, just trying to think about what we're kind of going to need here in terms of other UI things, just so I can kind of put some of that out there. And like I've often said before, I don't really like to try and anticipate what I'm going to need for stuff. So what I might do, what I think might be kind of a smart way to approach this problem, is to kind of go back and look at the debug code we've already done. Because we've already had plenty of times where we if zero things out and we add little debug overlays and stuff onto things that we just kind of did in the code. In fact, if you look, we've got this yellow border, right? There's a yellow border running around the screen, and that yellow border, all that is a thing to let us know that we've lined everything up exactly. It's a thing that says where the screen should be. And we also had a thing that let us like zoom the camera out. So we've had like tons of debug things that we've written as part of getting all of the engine stuff done to the point where we wanted it to be, right? We've done all that stuff. And so the question is, how can we go ahead and make that be a more sort of fundamentally accessible kind of a thing, where all of those options are going to be kind of easy for us to get to. My kind of dream scenario is like you just click the right mouse button or something, right? And you get access to all of that debugging. But there's going to be way more there than could possibly just be listed flat on the screen. Certainly more that can be in a radial menu, but even if we had, sort of stuff all over the screen, it's probably going to take a little bit of thought. So what I think I might do, in fact, now that I'm even talking it through, I think that kind of sets the stage, maybe even before I implement any more of the actual UI stuff. Maybe I'm going to go through and figure out what is a good way to make those things turn on and off, and let me pull that out, because I was thinking about that the other day. I was kind of thinking on Handmade here, I was like, we should tie into the debug system a way to kind of turn off and on these sort of debug systems. So, maybe I've changed my mind. Maybe I want to do that first and start to pull those things out into the debug system proper, so that we can kind of see how that's going to work, right? I think that would be my preference. Okay. So let's take the most simple example that I can think of so far, which is that in Handmade render group, right, we had this concept that the camera could be pulled back in sort of a debug way, if I remember correctly. There was sort of this concept of a debug camera. And so the way that this worked is everything still used the camera entirely consistently, right? So it was exactly the same as it used to be. There's nothing that changed. The only difference was that if I like came in here, and I changed this guy to an if1, it would like bring everything out. Oops, that's no good. Translation unit. So this is kind of a little annoying. I wonder how much this will affect our loop live code editing. If we have stuff that changes when we do the reload, I wonder if we're going to get problems here where it can't use the... I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if when we do the reload, we're going to have to do something where we flush. Because I am assuming that what happens here is that if we look at what actually is going on, so we've got opening event. Opening event is garbage there. Well, you know what? That does seem... This just looks like maybe a straight-up bug. Just a regular old bug. Does it not? How would that... Why would that have caused a problem? That's a little tricky. Because I want to say like, oh, well, yeah, we probably should, whenever we reset the debug system, whenever we do a reload of the code, since all of our marker points, all of our counter places might change, we should flush all of the debug events, right? That should be a reset. That seems pretty logical to me. However, the one thing I don't want to do is do that and have that mask a sort of different bug that we might actually have in here. So it kind of feels like we have some kind of a different problem. So I just want to take a second to investigate that a little bit, just so I can see and make sure that there isn't something kind of more wrong there. So you can see like this first open block is just nonsense, right? It's just totally garbage from the reload. And I guess, if you think about too how that's gonna go, since we have incremental frame processing, it does mean that when we do a code reload, it means that these pointers to that debug memory are going to kind of get vacated, right? Because that is a static variable that lives in there. It's also, you know, again, that's another reason why the counters are less good, because the counters need to look up into that static variable in this kind of annoying way. So I feel like it's probably safe, at least for the time being, to go ahead and flush that buffer. I feel like that's probably okay. And that's really easy for us to do because we know when the executable is reloaded, right? So when we come in and we kind of have our debug frame end happening here, we can, if we want to, go ahead and just sort of reset all of the variables. That's really easy to do. All we would really have to do there is vaporize the array event, like our whole array event index structure, like all of those all of the counts, right? So if we were to look at the handmade platform.h, oops, where we have the event array. So the event count, if all of those just got vaporized, right, that would be sufficient to do the reset, I would assume. So if we want to, we can just go ahead and say, all right, everything, if we need to do we'll just do one here, something like this, debug reset, or debug event reset. So what we need to do here is say all of the event counts in the entire system however many there are in the global debug table. However many of those there are, they all need to get reset to 0, right? However, well, you know what, now that I'm thinking about it too, though, why wouldn't they automatically get set to 0? Because since they're in the DLL, I feel like they should already get set to 0. So now that I think about it, probably really we only have to reset the incremental frame processing. That's it. Because, yeah, so I think really actually the only thing we need to do is reset this stuff, right? We just need to do restart collation on that. Yeah. That's all we need to do. So I suppose all we really need to do is say, okay, in the event, after we kind of set this stuff up, we can just go ahead and restart the collation. Oops. Restart collation. Debug state. Oops. Like so. So we can just do if we're in the situation where we have done a debug reset, which I'm assuming, I guess we probably want to put it in there. I am assuming that that's something that we should just get past in here, right? So if we take a look at platform, when we get to game frame end, oops, all we're getting right now is the game memory, and I don't know if that passes. It doesn't, right? So the game memory doesn't pass whether the executable was reset. Whether the executable was reset is actually passed in the input right now. So I'm going to go ahead and move that, I think, because I feel like that's something that I probably want in the memory, because that's the people who would normally deal with it are probably going to deal with it there a little bit more. So I'm just going to do it here and say, okay, if the memory executable reloaded is true, then I restart the collation. So then all I'd have to do is I'd have to go in through here and make sure that this is going to be the game memory that gets this set. And I assume it's game memory? Yeah. Okay. So it's game memory. And that should do it. See how that goes. Okay. Look at our little handmade hero there. He's awfully cute. All right, so I'm going to test this out again and see. Let's go ahead and make that happen. There's our little handmade hero kind of running around in there. He's super happy, and everything's fine. If I come in here to our render, let's see also about this guy here. There we go. We can zoom him in. See if we can zoom him back out. Okay. So now we clear that collation. So hopefully, and that may be a bug that you kind of have to catch at just the right time. But hopefully you can kind of see that we can, kind of make that happen relatively reliably now. So what I want to do is say, okay, I like the way that's working, right? I like more or less how that's happening. And I don't necessarily know that I want to super change the way that code works. But, one problem I have is I just don't like having to go find it, right? So what I want to be able to do here is say something, like, if debug UI, and then in here, I put some name. So I don't know what the name exactly would be. But if debug UI use debug camera or something like this. So let's say I did something like that. What I'd really like to do is make it so that actually, what happens is when I access the UI, it actually just compiles that code in or out, right? So it like changes the whatever that value is, and then like recompiles the code or something, so that it actually, so I can do stuff that actually might be really expensive, and it will just actually recompile the code. Do you know what I mean? It won't like leave it in there necessarily. That's kind of what I actually want to have happen. I mean, do you think that's ridiculous? Do you think that's too much to ask? Because you have to admit it's a little tricky. It would be a little tricky to make that work, right? But let's see. Let's start, right? Let's just start by making things relatively simple for ourselves, let's say. So suppose I have handmade debug switches or something like this, right? Or handmade config.h, maybe, right? Just totally making this up. I've never done this before. I'm just full on playing around. So let's suppose I were to do that. And in this file, I am going to make that equals 0. So now, if I were to compile this file, it's going to know that this is not going to be used. Of course, it's knowing that because it hasn't actually ever seen the config. So I need to put the config, probably, I probably even want the config at the top. In fact, I probably want it in Handmade platform so that everyone sees it, right? It probably wants to be the very most, like the primal, the most primal thing that anyone actually gets, right? So Handmade config is like, everyone sees it, always. Platform layer everywhere, right? So in Handmade config, it's got these variables, and that's the one for using the debug camera. So now, right, like I can go to the Handmade config file if I want to, right? And inside here, I can make it so that I just switch, that on and off. And that works fine, right? So no problems there. It's all good. But the question is, how would I get that out into a UI element? So for example, if I wanted to attach that to the radial menu, right, how would I do it? Right, it's a tough question. And I guess I would say, it probably requires a little bit of finesse. I'm trying to decide whether I should do this because I think I know the answer, and it's kind of a little banana cakes. But sometimes you got to be banana cakes on Handmade Hero, I would say. So let's just go ahead and do it. Let's just go ahead and say we wanted that to be part of the UI. Well, the UI is going to need to know one other thing, I think, probably, right? Just if we're being realistic. The UI is going to need to know one other thing, and that's the fact that this was a Boolean, right? So that's like a B32. You know what I mean? So it's probably going to need to know that this is, either a 0 or a 1, right? Something like this. As opposed to some other defined value, which could be something else entirely, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's a fairly reasonable thing to do. So now, if I wanted to present a UI that had the things in it, like use debug camera, the only way I could do that automatically is I would have to make some way for our game to edit this file, right? The game, if the UI wanted to actually do the whole process to actually change the code at runtime, it would have to edit this file, and then it would have to recompile, right? That's just what it would have to do. And so in order to do that, I'm pretty sure, it has to kind of rewrite the file. Now, that's not that big a deal, probably, if it would just look like this. Because rewriting this file is pretty straightforward, right? There's nothing all that weird happening there, I would think. So let's see if we can just get our debug code as it stands right now to hard-coded rewrite that file for us, right? Just rewrite that file in its entirety. Okay. So if I wanted to do that, what I would do is I would say, okay, maybe there's a function here called write handmade config. Yeah? Something like this. And it takes the debug state. I don't know. Again, just guessing. And then it's going to go ahead and use the platform layer to write the entire file. So if I go into Handmade Platform, and I come down here, we have debug write entire file. Debug write entire file. Oops. Where is, debug platform write. Debug platform write entire file is going to take this stuff. So it's going to take a file name, which we don't really know what that is yet, and then it's going to take the total size of whatever it is that we're trying to write. Yeah? Well, that shouldn't be too difficult, I suppose. At the end of the day, let's just do the most straightforward thing. And you know what? This actually dovetails nicely because we're going to have to replace the stuff that does printfing in standard I/O because we still are using that. So this will be another a good reason for that because we would need to use it here as well. So again, if we can just tie everything to just one thing where we're like, we need to replace a little printf thing, then that's kind of a good impetus to do it so we're not replacing something just for the one debug output. It actually feels like maybe there's a little bit more that we're using there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the debug state's debug arena, and I'm going to say that we just have some room there for writing this file. I guess I don't actually know. Maybe I'll even do it a little bit simpler. So maybe I'll just do something like, temp here. I'm just going to do the most basic thing for the moment. So if I have something like that, literally, if I just called what we had in what we were already calling in here, right? Where is that guy? Right, we've got this guy here. So if I'm already calling that then I know that as long as I replace that function, then both of these guys will work. So I won't have to worry about doing extra stuff when I go to replace that standard io.h include. So if I go ahead and print out to this guy, I know what I would need to print for replacing this config file. I would just need to print debug UI use camera, like so, right? And then I would need to print whatever that value of it was, and I would need to print this B32, whatever that is, and I need to print the pound define in front of it. But that would reprint out what's in that file, you know? And it would print it out to this buffer, and then this would tell me how big it was. So this is how much, because this function returns how many things it output. So I could just say write that, whatever you stuck in the temp, write it out to whatever the config file is. And so handmade config file name or something, I don't know, who knows, right? Whatever the config file name actually is. So if that's what we're going to do, go ahead and take a drink there. So if that's what we're going to do, all we need to know then is what the actual state of this thing is going to be. Just for the moment, I'll go ahead and take in something that's like, you know, use debug camera, like so. And now this will print, you know, either 0 or 1 depending on what that was set to. And so that will change that automatically. And then we'll write that. And for the moment, I'll just hard code this string so that we don't have to deal with that at the moment. But we'll have to change this just to make sure that it works on everyone else's machine. Although I guess if our build directory is relative, right? If we're running in handmade data, then all we need to do is go back 1 for code. So I guess all we really have to do is say we go back 1, go in the code directory, and we rewrite handmade config.h, right? So if I was to do that, I guess that would probably just always work, would it not? So we just need our platform here, and I don't remember what the name of that actually was. It's just platform. So if I do that, that rewrites the config file, right? It rewrites the C file for us. So in here, if I was to go through and every time we were to execute one of these guys, right, where we do this sort of nonsense, if I were to go ahead and actually rewrite the config file here, like so, for now I'll just hard code it to setting it to true. That means every time we do a gesture, it'll rewrite the config file. Does that make sense? So we can see this in action presumably already. There's handmade.config, and here I go running. I'm going to go in here, I'm just going to execute anything, and now I'm going to close. And in theory, now when I reload this, you can see it changed the config file from a 0 to a 1, right? So now we've got our C program is writing out its own self so that it can modify itself without us having to do anything complicated like write our own compiler, right? So now the only question is, how would we get ourselves to recompile, right? Because we want to be able to recompile. So let me go ahead and set that back to 0, so we're not using the debug camera. And so what I want to do is be able to make it so that I execute that and then it just recompiles itself, right? So if I was going to do that, how would I do that? Well, if I want to do that, really what I need is I need the platform layer to do something here, which I assume is something like, you know, execute, debug execute system command, right? Something like that. And presumably what I want to say is, well, where is the build normally run from? Well, all we normally do is in handmade code, we run the build.bat, right? We just run that thing. So in that same way, I could say go to this directory, run build.bat, except it's a little bit trickier than that because technically it's not build.bat that we're running because build.bat is a batch file, right? Technically what we're doing is we're running CMD, right? CMD is the command line interpreter. It's in C, Windows, right? System 32 probably. Right? That's what we're actually running. And so if I wanted to run that, I could tell that, hey, I need you to execute build.bat. And presumably it would, oh, I think you need a command line switch though, right? Like -K. Something like that? I don't remember. Is there a switch? Let's see. Carries the commands for the string and then terminates. So /c is what it is. Looks like. So let's try that. So if I did /c build.bat, so there it is, right? That built. And then if we were to execute, oh, and it auto executes. So I didn't need to exit, right? So just /c build.bat is really the only thing that we need to do, right? We can just run command.exe and tell it, hey, I need you to run build.bat. So if we had a way of saying, I need you to execute this system command in this directory, please, that would make our stuff work. And so the question is, can we do that? And of course, obviously, if things can execute system commands, then there must be a way to do it. And of course, in Win32, there actually is. I mean, you know, right? So if I wanted to go ahead and expand our platform layer slightly here to say that there's going to be some kind of a debug thing here, where in addition to all these other things, we have debug platform, you know, execute system command, something like that. Debug platform execute system command. And again, that's going to take sort of the path, the command, and the command line, right? And presumably, I guess it would return a bool 32 that's like whether, well, you know what, it could, I think most system commands typically return like an S32, like an int, an error code, so maybe we'll get that back, I don't really know. But so we'll try that. And then what I'll do is I'll say, okay, that debug platform execute system command thing, I'm just going to go ahead and inside like one of these guys here, so I don't know, like platform API where we have all the rest of the stuff, I'm just going to say debug execute system command is going to be in there. So at that point, everything would work if we had this magical thing that actually would do debug execute system command. So we just have to figure out some way to do that in Win32, right? So there's our execute system command, platform write entire file like that. Okay. So debug execute system command, here we are. And I don't even remember how to do this in Windows. Win32 execute system command. Let's see how we do that. System function. Shell execute is not really what we want. Let's see if they got this here. Create process is probably what we want, actually, now that I think about it. Yeah, I think create process is probably what we want. I don't think shell execute's what we want, because shell execute goes to the shell, and that's more for like I want to open a file, you know, the way Explorer would open a file, which doesn't seem particularly useful to me. So I think we probably just want to do create process. That seems like the better thing to do. That's what I would say. So if we're going to do create process, that's going to return us the success or the failure there. So here we go. We've got application name. We've got all this stuff here. So the application name, we know what that is, right? That's going to be one of the things that we got passed in here, right? So let's take a look. That's going to be command. The command line we have, it's this. Process attributes, I have no idea what that even means. Those are security attributes, so let's just say that that's null for now, because I don't really know what it should be. Thread attributes, again, these are just security attributes. We don't probably care about those. Inherit handles is whether it will inherit our like printing and that sort of stuff. I don't think I want to do that yet, if we do it at all, right? We have DW creation flags. What are the creation flags? This print, let's see, creation flags. This print also controls the new process priority class for a list of values. If none of the priority class says the process class is normal, that's what we want. I don't think we need anything besides normal. So let's see here. Do we care about any of these? Separating, suspended, debug process. I don't think we need any of these, so I think that's probably just a 0. I don't think we have any flags. I could be wrong. I don't think so. We don't need to change the environment. It can just use the calling processes environment, I would think. I guess I'd have to, yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. Current directory, we know what that is. That's this path here. The startup info, let's see, can this be null? Pointer to startup info or a startup info ex. Is there anything in, so we do need one of these guys, it looks like, and then process information receives a handle about the new process. So we need a startup info. Let's see what's in there. And a process information. Okay. I seem to be off by one here. That's a bit of a mistake. So startup info. Can't I just get this from somewhere? Do I really need to fill all that out? That seems like a lot. Responsible for ensuring that the standard handle fields, these fields, yeah, I don't know. Create process. Is there a good example? Creating processes. I want to see what they say if I actually have to do all that. Startup info. Oh, it looks like it's going to take care of it for me. If I just pass all zeros, it looks like it's fine. That's what they're doing here. So that should be pretty easy. Looks like if I just initialize those two to nothing, and then I need to make sure I set the startup info. I think it had a size. One of those things where you have to set the size, as Windows loves to do. One of the dumbest API decisions. So stupid. But yeah, so the CB structure has to be set to the size of startup info. And I don't know if process info also has that, but I suspect that it does not. But let's take a look. Yeah, so that's fine. So there we go. We're just going to call create process there. And for now, I'm just going to return the result as 0 because we're not even going to wait for the process to finish. But we'll probably add that. So we'll just do something here where we have like an if, so we know that we will do something to do wait for completion and get return code, probably. But let's take a look. I think we had 15 minutes left on the clock, so we probably have about 20 minutes left right now. So debug application execute commands, too few arguments for call. Is that really true? Really? I think there are 3 there, so I must have made a typo down here. And let's take a look. Debug, oops. Go away, Emacs thing, I can't see. I'm not Emacs thing, Handmade hero thing. I can't see my mini buffer. Fade away, fade away. 5-minute warning needs to fade away. All right, it's not fading away. Execute system command, debug execute system command. Debug platform, oops, platform, execute system command. Ooh. Oh, I was just missing a comma, that's all. All right, so this needs to be, that was a typo. That needs to be execute system command. Okay, so I don't know what this is going to do. They're probably not quite ready yet. But I'll go ahead and test it. So here we are, and we go ahead and toggle something, and it does not appear to have actually recompiled anything, right? At least I don't see anything. So we probably did rewrite the file because that was working just fine. That's in config, so I'm guessing that got changed, right? But we didn't recompile, and so what I want to do is see why we didn't compile, right? So debug execute system command. I want to go ahead and see what happens if I step in there. Here we go, right? And I've got the command is command.exe. I've got the command line cbuild.bat. I've got all this stuff set to nothing, startup info, process info. I'm going to go ahead and run. I want to see if anything happened. So we got back false, so that didn't work. And so basically we just have a bug in the way we're calling this. We're probably not specifying something correctly. So what I'm going to do is see if I can get a little bit more error information from Windows in the case where it goes wrong, right? And so get last error is the way Windows does error reporting. It's super janky and not particularly fantastic. But you go in here and you say get last error, and it returns you a D word that tells you what the error was. So if we do this, we can then look at what the error actually is. Just I'm gonna have to put so it doesn't go out of scope because the Visual Studio Debugger is so awful. I gotta just kind of do something with it there so that we can actually see it. But if I set this breakpoint and we run the game, I should be able to step in there and see what happens. So there we go. Here's the error code. The error code is 2. And there's a little convenient lookup tool, I think, usually here, error lookup. You can put in the 2 and hit lookup. Cannot find the file specified. So I'm guessing that it's just not in the path for some reason. I'm not sure. But if that's the case, that's pretty easy to solve, right? If that's the case, we can just do something like this, right? And say, could you go run that, please, right? Now, the other thing, too, that I don't actually know is I don't know whether this needs to be backslashed as well. So maybe I'll just try that first just to make sure. Yeah. All right, so let's see what happens if I give it a more explicit path to the file, the interpreter, and we'll see if that works. So it actually does appear to work, right? That seems like it is running our build just fine. Would you agree? So given that that's the case, now that we have that compiling, what I'll probably do is just say, okay, let's go ahead and actually make that feature work, because why not? So if I come in here and I do something, like again, I'm just sort of getting the sort of basic stuff out there. So if I have something in here that's going to track what this variable actually should be, I guess now that I think about it, all I really have to do, I don't even really need a variable. All I really need to do is just say, hey, whenever you go to write this thing out, right, in handmade debug.cpp, just write out whatever you had in your config file, right? Just write out the opposite of that. So that'll do a toggle, right? So now every time that I want to switch, I should be able to switch, and it will compile, right, like this. And you can see now we can actually switch between them. So now we basically have sort of like Uber debug UI, in the sense that now we actually don't even have to have any runtime cost for our debug stuff at all. They can literally be compiled out completely, and we can still toggle them at runtime while the game is running and not have to actually do anything at all, right? It's the perfect, it's like you get the perfect everything, right? Now, one thing that's a little annoying there, that's not probably not the best thing in the world, is that annoying kind of pop-up that sort of happens there. So what I would like to do instead, I think, is maybe manage that process a little bit more. What I'd like to know is, can I just go ahead and make it so that that thing doesn't actually pop up an actual window? So I don't know very much about calling CMD like this. Like I said, I've never done this before. What I'm doing, I'm totally making this up as I go. So if I go in here and I say, for CMD, what do you do? Let's see. So it looks like piper file to be ANSI causes the output of internal commands to a piper file to be Unicode, blah, 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 blah. None of this stuff looks interesting at all. Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to have a little bit more control over that window. So I'm just wondering if the startup info stuff would allow me to do that. So if I did the startup info thing, I wonder if I can pass something in the startup info, right, that would make that not happen. So say, for example, the W show window, which is the show window code in Windows. I wonder if I just straight up set that to say, like, hide, like, don't show, right? Don't show the window if it would prevent the window from pop, it would just leave it minimized, which I'd be fine with, right? So if we did show window, let's see here, right? It can be whatever we want. This member can be any of the values that can be specified in show window. So SW hide should be one of them, right? So I feel like that might be a good way just to start cleaning that up a little bit. So let's go ahead and look at Win32 Handmade. Let's go in here and say, all right, we've got the startup info. So I'm going to go ahead and set that value. Where'd you go? W show window. Show window. And I'm just going to see if that helps us at all avoid that kind of annoying window nonsense. So it's still showing it, right? That is not hiding a window. I don't see that as being a hide at all. So that's kind of annoying. Why is that the case? Why did you not hide the window? Why? Why, I ask you? Oh, it's if DW flags. So I have to I have to also set use show window. Okay. So if I have to also set use show window in DW flags, that seems easy enough to do. Let's go ahead and do that. Startup info, DW flags equals startup use show window. So now, will you hide the window, please? Nice. It's lovely, right? Look at how nice that is. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is, since we're not showing the window, we don't really know if a compile is in progress or exactly what's happening, and we don't know if there were errors in the compile or any of that stuff. So it might be nice to kind of make that just a little bit better. When we actually do this create process, right, we're going to get back this process info. That process info thing is going to come back to us. So if I look here at process information, we're actually going to get back this sort of handle information here, right? A handle to the newly created process. This handle is used to specify the process in all functions that perform operations on the process object, right? And IDs and stuff like this. So what I could do after that process information thing happens is I could look and see if there's some way to just say, hey, is this process still active, right? Like, what's the state of this process? Because there should be something on here which allows me to do that, right? I don't know what it is. Get process, maybe there's an is process. In maybe query process, query, I don't really know. I could wait on the process, but I don't really want to do that. I just want something that tells me what the state of the process is. And I'm not really sure what that would be. Now, maybe I could do a wait for single object on the process. Like we saw before, we have the ability to wait on things. So it's possible that I could do a wait for single object on a process, and then just give it a timeout of 0 seconds, right? Oh, or is signaled. Whatever it was. There is one for is signaled, right? I think. Because again, I have a handle to the process, which is itself a Windows handle that I can do checking on, just like we saw when we were working on this before, where it's got this concept of being in a signal state, much like the 7.4s and that sort of thing. So I should be able to do something like wait on it or check to see what its state actually is. So is there any way to just query that guy? This is something I probably should know, but have forgotten, actually. Sorry to say. So if I do blah, 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 reset event, set event, unregister wait for multiple objects. So wait for single object is probably all I would really need. So if I did wait for single object, it would return to me whether that object was signaled, right? So what I could do is just pass the handle and then see. So I'm just gonna see what happens here if I do wait for single object. So I'm gonna do wait for single object. I'm gonna pass the object that I got. So that is going to be in my process info, and I think it's just called hprocess, if I remember correctly. And I'm going to say for the milliseconds, I'm going to say infinite. So I'm just going to have the game lock up until the compile is done. That's what I'm hoping will happen here. I don't really know, right? So here we go. That's a good sign. Perfect. Okay. So if that's the case, that means I should be able to check to see if it's actually true. Let's see what is the D word supposed to return to me. Let's see here, remarks. Where's return value? If it succeeds under the event that caused the function return, it can be one of the following values. Wait object 0. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to say if wait for single object equals wait object 0, then, and we can also pass 0 here, then we know that this thing finished, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the debug system a way of actually managing that process, sort of saying, is the compile, like what's the status of the compile, right? Like what's happening down there in that compile. So what I want to do is I want to say that there's some other thing happening here, which is like a debug, process, something like that, a debug executing process, something like that. And it's going to have a return code, and it's it's going to have like a bool, like is it running? You know what I'm saying? And so what that'll do, and I guess what we'll say is, and did it started successfully? Like was it able to actually start the process? Is it running now? And then when it's not running anymore, you could check the return code. Something like that. And so when you actually do this execute system command, it will return you one of these. And so what I can do is I can say, here is that process. Excuse me. And we can also stick in here something like an OS handle thing, because everyone's going to be either in a 64-bit integer or an integer or something like that. So we should be able to also just make sure that we can always just stuff it in there so we don't have to do anything fancier like a pointer where we'd have to allocate memory for no real good reason, right? Okay, so if I have one of these, now I've got a different kind of result that's coming back. So in here, what we do is we'd say, if we got in here, then we started it successfully. So that's true. And then we have the result is running is also going to be equal to true. Now that I think about it, if this is going to be a query sort of a situation, that's not actually what I would do. I guess it's really more like this. Type def struct debug executing process actually is just the handle. Probably. And this is debug process state. And it returns these sorts of things, I would assume, is more the situation, right? And so this OS handle will just be set to like an invalid handle value if things don't work. That'd be my guess, right? And so what we do is say debug platform get system command state or something, or get process state. And you just pass this executing process handle back. That's what I think. So yeah, in here you would get a debug process state back, and you'd pass debug executing process in, like so. And then when you do get the process state, platform get process state, you can find out, if it's still running or what's going on, right? That seems reasonable. For now, that's just the basic. Okay. So debug executing process here. If you get in here to the starting successfully bit and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to go ahead and actually just make this stuff happen as well, because we kind of know exactly what this is going to do now. I already just said exactly what it's going to do. So we've got debug get process state, like so. So what I want to do is that's going to go in here, like this. And what's going to happen is right here, when we call create process, that's when we would know that we can set the OS handle equal to whatever the process info H process is, so we can store it for later, right? Something like that. So I guess we actually, so I don't really know how to maybe convert. I guess what we would probably want to do is do this the other direction. So we probably want to just assert that whatever size our OS handle is, it's greater than or equal to whatever the size of this thing is, so we know we can store it properly. And then we probably want to do it actually like this, right? We're just going to say, like, romp into that memory, whatever the H process is. We don't care how big it is as long as it fits. Just fit it in. And that'd be fine. If that doesn't happen, then what we'll do is set result OS handle equal to invalid handle value. And so then I think we're all good. At least I think. Can't see any reason why we wouldn't be. So then when we come in here, we would know that this thing that we need to do, debug process state, result, all we would need to do there is say, okay, first of all, if the OS handle that we get, so if the process OS handle, if that equals invalid handle value, then we know that the result started successfully is false. In fact, we know all that stuff is 0. So we just leave it as it is. So basically, it's only if it's not equal to invalid handle value that we would go through with it. And assuming that it's not, we can then look and say, okay, if we go ahead and say the process, excuse me, OS handle, pass that back to Windows, say, is this still running? If Windows says it's not running, then we can close the handle here, because we don't need to deal with the handle anymore, right? We can just get rid of it. And at least I think that seems reasonable. I don't know if we want to do that. We may want to release the handle in sort of a different way. That's a tough call. It's a tough call. I'm going to do it this way for now, but to do we want a formal release mechanism here? Probably. This debug code doesn't really matter, but you know. So anyway, we'll go ahead and close this up. In fact, I'll go ahead and get the H process back there more explicitly. There it is. So assuming that we get back the fact that it's been signaled, then we kind of know what happened here. We know that it, well, we know in either case it started successfully. And we also know that it's running now. Or I should say, it's running if we don't block on it. In this case, we know that it has stopped running. It's completed. So we want the return code. I don't know if we can do, I think there's something like get exit code or something like that we can do, like get process exit code. There should be some way we can get the exit code. So get, where is it? Get exit code process. Get exit code process. Hello? No rush there. Okay. So if we pass the process, it'll give us back the exit code. So that's cool. I think that's what we want. So basically what we say is here's the exit code. Actually, I guess we just do this. Turn code 0. Turn code. And then we'll just assume that that goes okay. We'll just, it's fine. Don't worry about it. All right, so if that's where we're at, I think that's mostly implemented for the most part. Oops, we need debug executing process and debug process state. And so, ooh, I'm almost out of time. I am out of time. I got to stop coding. It's too bad. This is kind of fun thing to do and wanted to kind of finish, but what are you going to do? All right, so let's go ahead here and make that work that way as well so that it doesn't complain about my little shuffle typecasting, doing my little thing and dancing around and so on. Here we can do the same thing, so we just go each process, and that is that. So now what we can do is we can do something like in the debug system. We can keep one of these. So in Handmade platform, we have the debug process state. We can have the compiler, or something is there. Oops, I didn't mean that. I mean debug executing process, like so. And what I can do is I can say initialize this. Maybe we'll just say compiling is a thing, and there's the handle of the compiler. So then what I'll do is when we launch one of those, we know the compiling is normally set to false. When we go ahead and set that up, when we do a write handmade config, and we do our execute debug command, what we'll do is we'll say debug state compiling equals true. I'm also going to do it here where I say if debug state compiling is not equal to true, or I should say if not compiling. I don't want to launch two compilers. Then we set it equal to true. We set the compiler equal to platform debug system. Okay? And so in theory now, what should happen is when I do this, it will only let us compile once, right? Because we set it and we never clear it. So now it did one compile, and now if I do another compile, it should not do anything. And that's what it does, right? So what I want to do now is I just want to take one more step. Like I said, kind of into this, so I'm going like 3 or 4 minutes over here. But now when I've got that, and I know it's compiling, what I can do is when I'm printing out debug text here, right? This sort of thing, debug text line. What I can do is at the top of this, right? I can do something where I sort of say like, oh hey, if debug state compiling, then I want to in here get the status of that. I want to find out the process state. So I want to figure out what that state is. So I want to do a platform debug get process state, and I want to pass it the compiler. And if the state is running, then I'm just going to print out a debug text line that just says compiling. You know what I mean? If it's not, then that's done. So we're done with the process, and I can set compiling to false. You know what I mean? Seems pretty reasonable to me. Nothing too bizarre going on there. Platform API doesn't have that. Oh man, it doesn't. You're totes right, man. You are totes right about that. Let's fix that. Where my platform API at? Where it at? I'm sorry, I used slang there. That's not good. Kids, you should talk in regular English. Okay, so debug get process state. Oops. So debug get process state's happening. I'm going to go ahead and where is that stuff? API. There it is. Debug get process state. So now I should be able to actually compile. And in theory, now the compiler runs as a subset of our game, and there it is compiling, and now it's done. Compiling, done. Beautiful. Beautiful. So that's pretty awesome, I would say, because the stuff that we are about to be able to do with that is going to be kind of off the chain, if I don't mind saying. I have never done that before. I don't know why, but this is about to get pretty real here. Tomorrow's going to be a pretty crazy day, I have a feeling. But I'm going to stop there so we can take a few minutes of questions. All right, folks. Let's do this. Send me your questions. Q:, please. Power C9K. Why be able to compile from the game if we can do it from the editor? Is it just to be cool? Well, being cool is definitely a good idea. I wouldn't necessarily knock that as a reason, but it's so that we can just not have to tab back and forth, right? It's like if I'm running the game and I'm trying to work on something here, right? And I want to do some UI thing. And I want to turn something on and off, I'd rather not have to then tab, go like this, recompile, tab back, and then finish what I was doing, right? I want to be able to just do stuff and have it update. Now, like I said, I've never really done it before, so maybe it turns out to not be that useful or something, but I just feel like that's kind of a cool way to do a debug switch instead of actually having the debug switches always be actually all compiled in and actually doing branches all over the place to decide whether or not they're going to execute. Chronal Dragon, compile in Mr. Forth's editor and do all the game development work from in-game. Yeah, I would love it if Mr. Forth's editor was a thing that you could just kind of compile into your stuff, or there's like a DLL you just call. That would be pretty awesome. And SZ, I like how it's startup info and process underscore information. Inconsistency even in a single small part of the one API. Do such things annoy you in a professional API? Those things might annoy me if it weren't for the fact that there's so much other busted stuff. That is a pretty small thing. If that was the worst thing, I would actually be really happy. So that sort of stuff, it would only annoy me if we got rid of all the things that are absolutely horrifically bad that are separate from that. It's a pretty low-hanging thing. Mr. Forth mentioned, why are we writing to a code file instead of just passing -d to the build line? Seems like it would be a little easier, although I have to admit you made that look pretty easy. The reason is because it's about to get a lot more complicated than that, and there'll probably be like 200 of those, and they probably will have all things like strings in them or expressions and stuff that might be annoying to try to quote properly for passing to the shell and might overflow size buffers or who knows what, right? So a code file I know I can do anything with. And also, it means that they get remembered for like the next build that happens outside. You know what I mean? Because like those settings I want to potentially persist, if that makes sense. Huber Caleb, why not use system instead of create process? So system, if I'm not mistaken, is in the C runtime library. Probably. I don't actually know. Yeah, system's in the C runtime library. And so, like I said, I don't really want to use any libraries on Handmade Hero. Like the final game I'd like to ship, no libraries at all. And right now, the only thing that prevents us from saying we're already there is the C runtime library. So I feel like I want to remove it. And so if I want to minimize the number of things that we call in there so that it's as easy as possible to remove it. And so since it was free for me to use create process, I didn't use system because it wouldn't take me any, it didn't really take me any longer. I mean, maybe it would have saved 5 or 10 minutes, but it makes it so I don't have to use the C runtime library. Because like I said, the end goal for Handmade Hero, we already really only don't use any libraries that are external, but we do still link with the compiler's library. And I'd like to not even link with that when we get to the end. Glayman 1605, do you plan on reading the original config file and then rewriting with modified values? Yes. The Sizik, why not just set a Boolean variable instead of recompiling a pound define? Because now we have no performance overhead. So for example, we can put tons of debug code everywhere in our game, including, and here is the spoiler alert, including our profiling blocks. So we can now turn on and off our profiling blocks dynamically in the game's UI, so that if we have things that we don't want to profile a lot of the times because they generate too many debug events, it's okay. We can actually turn them on in certain circumstances and turn them off. And that can all be completely flexible and handled within the game's UI, which is going to be pretty awesome. Will there be a dev console? Probably not, because I can't think of any reason why I would need that. Pseudonym 73. Also, system runs a program through command.exe, which is yet another dependency. I get it is, but not really, because we need that for our build anyway. So it's not really an additional dependency, right? I would think. I mean, we need CMD, so that's not really an additional one, I don't think, but I don't know. So, is that the end of the questions? That's pretty great. I wish Microsoft's compiler wasn't so slow, because the turnaround time there would be much faster if it wasn't. I guess we don't need the asset builder to be built anymore, really, because we did what we wanted to do with it. So there's that, but. The chat recommended create no window as a process creation flag. You could probably use that instead of the minimized window. I don't think it's minimized, though. Is it? So if it's compiling, it's not there. So it's SW hide is not SW minimize. SW hide means don't ever show the window to the user at all. So I don't think we need to make it not create a window. I think it's okay that it creates its window. We just don't ever display that window. And I think that might be better, because I don't really know what happens if you tell it not to create a window at all. I'm afraid that may, who knows if that breaks something sometimes. I don't even know. What is in the batch file that's run? It's just our batch. It's our standard build batch file. This is the build that we use. So it's just running our normal build. Power C9K, why does it zoom out? Because that's what it's modifying, the debug camera. That's what it's actually setting. Every time we do that, it sets the debug camera, it toggles it. Are you using Sublime? No, I'm using Emacs. Contemplation, can you add a radial menu for debug camera instead of piggybacking off toggle graph? It's bugging me. No, because that's what we will be doing tomorrow. No jumping ahead. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut down here. That was pretty exciting. I'm pretty psyched about what that will let me do. Never actually done that before. I don't know why it took 60 minutes. Probably should have. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you, as always. If you would like to follow along with this series at home, you can always pre-order the game Handmade Hero on handmadehero.org, and it comes with the source code so you can play around with it at home, experiment with it, do whatever sorts of explorations you are trying to do, and learn from it, which is a great way to go if you want to learn from the series. We also have a Patreon page. If you just want to support our video series, you can always subscribe to that. It's very much appreciated. We also have a forum site you can go to ask questions and look at the annotated episode guide to catch up on past episodes, and a tweet bot you can go to look at what the schedule is for the upcoming week. And also, if you want to follow that tweet bot, it'll tweet reminders at you when the stream goes live. So if you're trying to catch it live and just want to know, that's a pretty handy little tool as well. So that's it. I will be back tomorrow when I will be playing with this compile feature, because I'm pretty psyched about it, and there's all sorts of things I can think of that we could do. So I'm pretty psyched about that. So that's about it for now. I'll be back tomorrow for that. Hope to see you here again, 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Until then, please have fun programming. I'll see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.